Hello students, welcome back. So today we are going to do a very interesting chapter which is Amazing Animals. So Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in his autobiography. What do we mean by autobiography, students? When a person writes about his or her own life, we call it autobiography. So this extract, this whole story has been taken from the autobiography of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Recounts his experience with animals when he stayed in various jails during the struggle for Indian independence. So he wrote about many amazing animals throughout his journey when he used to stay in jails during the struggle of Indian independence. Let us start, students. Autumn again was pleasant, and so was the winter, except when it rained. With thunder and rain and piercing cold wind, one longed for a certain habitation and a little warmth and comfort. Occasionally, there would be a hailstorm. So, what do we mean by hailstorm here, students? It means heavy rain or condition of coming of a storm. With hailstones, so hailstones means ice stones bigger than the marbles coming down on the corrugated iron roof and making a tremendous noise. So, what do we mean by artillery bombardment, which means that someone was bombing the roof? It felt like that. All the hailstorm felt like that. I remember one day particularly, it was the 24th December 1932. There was a thunderstorm and rain all day, and it was bitterly cold. Although it was one of the most miserable days from the bloody point of view that I have spent in gaol. What do we mean by gaol here, students? Prison. So the time he spent in gaol, 24th of December 1934, was one of the many miserable days. Why? Because thunderstorm and rain was happening all the day. Throughout the day, rain was pouring and it was a miserable day and everything felt cold. In evening, it cleared up suddenly and all my miseries departed. What do we mean by departed? They went because everything came to a standpoint, and in the evening, everything cleared out suddenly. The weather was fine now. When I saw all the neighboring mountains and the hills covered with a thick mantle of snow. The next day, Christmas Day, was lovely and clear, and there was a beautiful view of snow-covered mountains. Prevented from indulging in normal activities, we became more observant of nature's way. So he is observing the nature, the snowfalls, the thunderstorms, the hailstorms and the change of weather every now and then from all the prisons, and he is recording everything in his autobiography. We also watched the various animals and insects that came our way. As I grew more observant, I noticed all manner of insects living in my cell or in the little yard outside. I realized that while I complained of loneliness, that yard, which seemed empty and deserted, was teeming with life. All these creeping or crawling or the flying insect lived their life without interfering with me in any ways, and I saw no reason why I should interfere with them. So now Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, he is sitting in his prison and he is observing the nature, the snow, the weather and all the insect, the flying insect and the crawling insect, and he is writing in his autobiography. But there was a continuous war between me and bedbugs. So now Panditji is saying that I had been in a continuous warfare with bedbugs and mosquitoes to some extent because they used to bite him. That's why. I tolerated wasps and hornets, and there were hundreds of them in my cell. So he's saying there were hundreds of wasps and hornets and many kind of insects in his cell, but he resisted. He didn't do anything about them. When inadvertently, I think a wasp had stung me. What do we mean by tiff here, students? A little fight. Why? Because a wasp had stung him. So there was a little tiff, there was a little anger in Panditji because he got stung by a wasp. In my anger, I tried to exterminate but they put up a brave fight in defense of their temporary home, which probably contained their eggs. So now Wasp and Panditji, they both are having a little tiff, a little fight, because Panditji is occupying their place and Wasp want to save their home and their eggs. I desisted and decided to leave them in peace if they did not interfere with me anymore. So Panditji left the place and let the wasp take over their home. I did not like bats, but I had to endure them. But I have to be with them because I was confined in prison. Panditji is saying, I am confined in prison. I have no other option. I have to endure them. I have to live with them. They flew soundlessly in the evening dust and one could just see them against the darkening sky. Airy things, I had a horror of them. So now Panditji is horrified by the little sounds they make. They seem to pass within an inch of my face and I was always afraid that they might hit them. So Panditji is scared of all these little insects that are present in his cell. Sometimes he is giving them a fight, sometimes he is resisting and leaving their home, and he is adjusting to all these animals in the prison, and he is writing about all kinds of animals he meet in this prison or various prisons that he visited or have been to. Then there were squirrels, crowds of them. If trees were around, they would be very venturous. What do we mean by venturous, students? They used to roam here and there. The squirrel used to roam here and there, up the trees and down the trees, and come right near us. In Lucknow Gaol, I used to sit reading almost without moving for considerable periods, and a squirrel would climb up my leg. So a squirrel used to climb up Netaji's leg when he used to sit under a tree while reading his book on my knees and have a look around, and then it would look into my eyes. So now this little squirrel, he is looking into the eyes of Netaji and realize that I was not a tree or whatever it has taken me for. Fear would disable it for a moment and then it would scamper away. What do we mean by scamper? The squirrels would be afraid and they would run away. Little baby squirrels would sometimes fall down from the trees. The mother would come after them and roll them up into a little ball and carry them off to safety. Occasionally, the baby got lost. One of my companions picked up 3 of these little lost baby squirrels and looked after them. So, one of Netaji's companion, one of Netaji's friend, picked up 3 squirrels, 3 of these lost baby squirrels, and he looked after them. They were so tiny that it was a problem feeding them. The problem was, however, solved rather indigenously. So, what do we mean by indigenously? Natively. It means they did some sort of jugaad by their own. A fountain pen filler. So, what was the jugaad that they actually found? What do we mean by indigenously here, students? Jugaad, right? So, what was the jugaad? Netaji and his companion found out a fountain pen filler with a little cotton wood attached to it, made an efficient feeding bottle for the squirrel that his companion adopted. Pigeons abounded in all the gaols I went to, except in the mountain prison of Almora. So, Netaji states that except the prison of Almora, everywhere he went to, he found pigeons in abundance. There were thousands of them, and in the evening, the sky would be thick with them. So, they were so much in abundance that the sky would be thick with them. Sometimes the girl officers would shoot them down and feed on them. There were menas, of course, they are to be found everywhere. A pair of them nested over my cell door in Dehradun and I used to feed them. So Netaji used to feed menas also. They grew quite tame, and if there was any delay in the morning or the evening meal, they would sit quite near me and loudly demand their food. So they became so familiar with Netaji that whenever Netaji failed to get their food, they used to shout and start chirping loudly. It was amusing to watch their signs and listen to their impatient cries. So Netaji states that it is very amazing or very amusing for me to watch all these signs and all these chirpings and to listen to them and their impatient cries that they are crying for food. Dehradun had a variety of birds and there was a regular jumble of singing and lively chattering, and high above it all came the koel plaintive call. During the monsoon and just before it, the brain fever bird visited us. And I realized soon why it was so named. It was amazing to see the persistence with which it went on repeating the same notes in daytime and at night, in sunshine and in pouring rain. We could not see most of these birds. We could only hear them as a rule, as there was no trees in our little yard. There was a large colony of monkeys in Bareilly Gaon, and their antics are always worth watching. What do we mean by antics here, students? They are acts. So their acts and actions, it is always worth watching them. One incident inspired me. A baby monkey managed to come down into our barrack enclosure and he could not mount up the wall again. The ward and some convicts overseers and other prisoners caught hold of him and tied a bit of a string around his neck. So all the prisoners who were present there, they tied a bit of a string around the monkey's neck. The parents of the little one saw all this from the top of the high wall and their anger grew. So the monkey parent, they were seeing their child in such a terrible position and their anger grew. Suddenly what happened, students? Suddenly one of them, a huge monkey, jumped down and charged almost right into the crowd which surrounded the baby monkey. It was an extraordinary brave thing to do. For the warden and the CEOs had sticks and lathis and they were brandishing them about and there was quite a crowd of them. But the monkey parent, he was brave. He landed right in front of the crowd and saved his child from that crowd. Reckless courage trembled and the crowd of humans fled, terrified, leaving their sticks behind them. So everyone ran after seeing this angry monkey in front of the crowd taking up charge, and he was so courageous that everyone ran. The little monkey was rescued finally. Often we had animal visitors that were not welcomed. Scorpions were frequently found in our cells. So what do we mean by scorpion? Bichu here, students. Scorpions were frequently found in our cell, especially after a thunderstorm. It was surprising that I was never stung by one. So now Panditji states that I am very surprised that I have never been stung by a scorpion. For I would come across them in the most unlikely places, on my bed or sitting on a book which I had just lifted up. So even in this unforeseeable circumstances, he was never stung by a scorpion. I kept a particularly black and a poisonous looking brute in a bottle for some time, feeding him with flies, etc. And then I tied him up with a wall with a string. He managed to escape. So this scorpion managed to escape from the bottle in which Netaji has kept him. 3 or 4 snakes were found in my cell or near them. News of one of them got out and there were headlines in the press that there was a snake in the cell, so everyone got afraid, and this incident was reported in the news. As a matter of fact, I welcome the diversion. Prison life is dull enough and everything breaking the monotony is appreciated. What do we mean by monotony here, students? It means anything which is repetitive and boring is appreciated, is always welcoming. And this news of 3 to 4 snakes which were found in cells breaking, not that I appreciate or welcome snakes, but they do not fill me with terror. So, Nehruji is saying that he is not afraid of snakes as they do some people. I am afraid of their bites, of course, and would protect myself if I saw a snake. In Alipur Gaol in Calcutta, I woke up in the middle of the night and felt something crawling over my foot. I pressed a torch I had and saw a centipede on bed. Instinctively and with amazing rapidly, I vaulted clear of that bed and nearly hit the cell wall because he thought that there was a snake, but it actually turned out to be a centipede. In Dehradun, I saw, or rather, an animal which was new to me. So, in Dehradun, he saw a new animal. So, who was this new animal, students? Let's find out. I was standing at the gaol gate talking to the gaoler when we noticed a man outside carrying a strange animal. So, Panditji called this new animal a strange animal, Adbhut animal. Why? The gaoler sent for him and I saw something between a lizard and a crocodile, about 2 feet long with claws and a scaly covering. So, this animal had a scaly covering and claws with a scaly covering. This unclothed animal, which was very much alive, had been twisted round in the most peculiar way, forming a kind of a knot. So, this animal was held up in a way of a knot and its owner had passed a pole through this knot and was merrily carrying it in this fashion. He called it a bow. When asked by the gaoler what he proposed to do with it, he replied with a broader smile that he would make a bhujji, a kind of a curry out of this animal that he was actually carrying. He was a forest dweller. Subsequently, I discovered from reading F.W. Champion's book, The Jungle in Sunlight and Shadow, that this animal was pangolin. So, this animal was actually pangolin, students. This strange looking animal was actually pangolin. Prisoners, especially long-term convicts, suffer mostly from emotional starvation. Often they seek some emotional satisfaction by keeping animal pets. So, all these people, they used to keep some kind of animal pets. The ordinary prisoners cannot keep them, but the convicts overseers have a little more freedom and the gaol staff usually does not object. The commonest pets were squirrels and strangely mongoose. So, they also used to keep mongoose with them. Although dogs are not allowed, I got tied with some dogs accidentally in Dehradun. A gaol officer had bought a bitch. He was, however, transferred and he exerted her. The poor thing was a homeless wanderer living under culverts, picking up scraps on the wardens and usually starving. I was being kept in the lockup outside the gaol roper. She used to come to me begging for food. I began to feed her regularly and she gave birth to a litter of pups under the calvet. So, one time when Nehruji was in a prison, he used to feed a dog, a bitch regularly and repeat. And there was a time after a while that bitch gave birth to many pups. Many of these were taken away, but 3 remained and I fed them. So, after a while, puppies fell ill and started dying because of some or the other kind of illness. and gave me a great deal of trouble. I nursed her with care, and sometimes I would get up a dozen of times in the course of the night to look after her. She survived, and I was happy that my nursing had pulled her round. I came in contact with animals far more in prison than I had done outside. Had always been fond of dogs. So now Jawaharlal Nehru states that he has always been fond of dogs and kept some, but I could never look after them properly as other mates claimed my attention. In prison, I was greatly fond of their company. So this brings us to the end of the chapter, students. I hope you all enjoyed this very interesting chapter, which was taken from the autobiography of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Thank you, students.